Thank you, Brian. I can't believe this because I was actually really disappointed that I wasn't going to get to hear Brian. Brian came over and taught us extremities when we were going through the college, and I've met up with Brian at numerous conferences all around the world, and he is a hero of mine. So I'm delighted. I'm here today to talk a bit about research with where we're at, not just in New Zealand, and also to do a bit of a plug with what we need to do and where we need to go as a profession. As a profession, I think we've been notoriously good at ignoring science and research because what we do in practice works so bloody well. Yeah? We get patients well. And as we know from PR and marketing, that's kind of the best kind of marketing and growth in practice that we're ever going to get is that our patients love us and they're going to refer other people in. But the reality of the world that we are living in now is an evidence-based one. And I think that we've ignored it for way longer than we really should have. And we're getting the side effects from that right now. Because I don't know if Patrick's told you the reason why they kicked the chiropractic degree out of Macquarie, or at least the official reason that they can give with backing. He did? Yeah, it's because they are not doing research to the level that they want it. So universities are driven by not just producing graduates, but by actually producing really high quality and lots of research. And that isn't happening in our chiropractic programs around the world. It is happening in some chiropractic programs, but not all. And this is what's taking place now in Australia. It's not a reflection of the quality of the scientists there either. Because those Aussie chiropractors, the researchers there, are brilliant. And they're my friends. Whenever we travel around the world, they're the Western Island of New Zealand. Or, anyway. So I mean, and we get on really well, and they do some great work, but they have no funding, no support from the universities. And I was actually just going to ask you if, Brian, if you would just give like a 2-minute plug on that, because it's the funding for research is almost impossible to get. And I'll talk about New Zealand in a minute, but if Brian can just quickly share with us in Australia how hard it is for them to get research funding over there as well.
I don't think you'll need that.
You would do it because we have some hearing challenged members.
Oh, okay. Well, I still don't think they'll need that. My voice is usually not a problem. For some of you that don't know me, I was the Dean of Chiropractic at Murdoch University in Perth for 6 years. Taught there before them. Fortunate enough to work with one of your illustrious members, Stephen Pallister, who was the foundation dean in setting up that whole program, and did a brilliant job. Research is quite different in the university, and I'll try and keep this short because I want to hear what Heidi has to say, but it's very political, but it's also a funding mechanism. What they do is they drive off of previous research, and it goes into the funding model within the government that the government then hands down to the universities. And if you don't have a stack of research that you've done over the years, then you're not going to get funding. So what it is if you're the newcomer to the area of research, you actually are handicapped where you can never get funding. And you have to, the only strategy you've got is to ride off of other people's shirt tails. What is the issue then? We've got very few people that are actually trained in research that can do research. We have very few PhDs. And we have very few people that are connected with people that they can ride off of shirt tails. And so what it is that we've been strangulated in the entire process. And quite honestly, we as a profession haven't woken up to this, because we've been in universities for over 30 years in Australia. We should have realized this a lot sooner than this, and we should have gotten off our backsides and actually supported it and done it. Well, now we're living with the problem. It's an unfortunate thing. Macquarie has said officially that it was not in their strategic plan to support chiropractic. That's what their official statement was. One of the reasons is that they are not excelling in research, and they are not getting high rankings at research. If your department does not get high rankings, which is attributed to funding that you get and publications, then that drops the ranking of the university. Macquarie wants to become one of the top 8. And right now, it's right below it. And so it's going to drop anything that will drop its standards down. And that's why they use that as an example and a reason to get rid of firearms. Anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Brian. I just think it's really important to get insight from someone over there too in how complex this whole system is. And one of the things that we've been incredibly lucky with here in New Zealand, and I do say lucky because I came out of the University of Auckland, which is one of the top % universities worldwide. So I was lucky. I got the right education. I'm trained to do research. But I also happen to have a chiropractic brain and heart. And that has been, I think, the one thing that's made our research here in New Zealand so different worldwide. Because there is quite a lot of research coming out from chiropractors, but it doesn't seem to even excite chiropractors. So that, you know, like, what's the point then? If we're not researching questions that are important to us, what's the point? So I want to talk to you a little bit about this evolving science of chiropractic. Because a lot of you, like Margaret was saying, tell a story that's 115 years old, which is cool, you know, I mean, but it's not. Like, in this world that we're living in today, we kind of need to back up what we're saying. And you can tell the same awesome chiropractic story that gets people so friggin' excited about it, but you can say it in a way now using new language, using cutting-edge neuroscience language, and backed with chiropractic studies, mainly done here in New Zealand. And that's pretty awesome. So what we're kind of proposing to do is that we work more as a team. One thing I got out of listening to Peter Boyes is how complex just marketing and media and all that shit is, eh? I mean, far out, you know, that's a different world. I don't know that world. You know, and I sit with Peter, and he was giving that as an example. It's really quite funny. We sit and talk, and I tell him all this exciting research, and he goes, okay, can you just translate that down a little bit? And so I try and use more language, and he goes, okay, so are you really trying to say this, this, and this? I'm going, yep, 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 yep. And then he goes off and comes up with clut syndrome. I'm like, oh. But, you know, I get the importance of it, and I think that's how we've got to work as a team. But we can do this together, all of us, because like Peter was saying, it's really important what you guys are doing in practice. And more, it's not just me doing research off on my own, and it's not just you guys doing chiropractic, but together, if we work together, then we can make a huge difference with how the whole world views what chiropractic is, and who's that going to affect? No, it's going to affect all those people that don't have access to us because they have some warped idea of what we do, or their friggin' doctors tell them not to come see us, right? You know, and I'm prepared and more than happy to come and present. Even to come around to your local communities. You're more than welcome to invite all your nasty doctors that don't like us, invite along patients. I mean, I've presented to medical professionals, to professors, I've presented to neurologists, to neurosurgeons, and I present the chiropractic story as I see it, as I believe, and as I'm going to talk to you about today. And they get it, you know? But we can all do this, and that's the other thing that we'd really like to do, is try and work with you so that we can teach you how to do it. It took me 7 years lecturing at the college and some pretty friggin' nasty, horrible student feedback in the first couple of years, because obviously I couldn't explain well enough. Not only couldn't I explain well enough the research that we were doing, I couldn't make them understand why I was doing it, the language I was using, or even the relevance of it to them as a chiropractic student. And actually there's a guy in this room here today who made me cry with his student feedback. And I don't think he knows this, but I literally bawled. But, you know, from all that sort of stuff, that's where you learn, right? If you get the nasty truth back thrown in your face, that's where you learn. So over the last 7 years, I have developed how to do this in a way that the students at the college can now give back to me in their own words. Not only do they enjoy it, not only do they think it's fun and exciting, they volunteer, they come and they're my subjects, they volunteer and help me do the research, and they get it, they can communicate it back out again. So I've won, I reckon I've won. I've managed to find a way to teach this guy to you guys in a language that you can use, something that's user-friendly for you in practice, something that you can take back to your patients and you can talk about the science. So I can give you the words and we can practice how that happens. But anyway, I'll get into it. I don't often, even in my lectures, get past slide 1 either, so this isn't new. We've made quite a lot of changes at the college, and one of the things that we've done is establish a research centre. Like Brian was saying, it's really important that you actually gain a reputation, that you actually get some research out there, and that it's noticed, that it's high quality, that you ride off the coattail of others. And again, for some reason, maybe it was my training, I've managed to do all of that. I'm sitting now on a platform where I can exponentially increase and spew out some incredibly relevant and important, cool research that really will make a difference for all of us, and not just all of us, because I get flown all around the world too, to present, to talk about this research, to translate this research, and usually the chiropractors, their eyes, light up, and they stand up and they ask me, so is it okay if I say this, this, and this? Because some parts of the world, the students get taught they can't touch a patient unless they've got pain there. And if they've got pain in a joint, they can only work on the joint below it or the joint above it. I mean, can you imagine practicing like that? I mean, that to me isn't chiropractic. And so unless we get all of this out there, and more of it and a lot of it, the way that the world is changing what chiropractic is, it's happening. And we are very isolated in New Zealand. We've got a team. We have all of, right now, 3 full-time people. Woohoo! One of them's Kelly Holt, just finishing his PhD off. So right now, and he's in the last few months of his PhD, he's doing a brilliant job. That man is so smart. And I'm getting really worried about what's happening in Australia. I actually sent him an email just the other day saying, now, no thoughts of moving over there, okay? Because I need you here. We've also just hired Imran Kaniatsi. He's a Pakistani, ridiculously bright guy, worked on brain-computer interface, like stroke research, basically. He's a bioengineer, but he's also done neuroscience. He's a whiz on the computer. Analysis that will take me months, he can do in days. I mean, this man is worth his weight in gold. Absolutely. We also have one part-time admin person. Normally in the States, if you've got a real good research centre, you have a 1-to-1 ratio. So our one part-time person, again, she's worth her weight in gold to us. I have one graduate who's just recently graduated who is at the moment volunteering, because that is the extent of the funding that we have right now. That is it. We've had to take a bit of a cut just recently, and we are getting really quite desperate. We have got no money. So I have people like Matt Kingett, who's just graduated. He is so ridiculously bright, it's not even funny. He came in and volunteered for a month when I had a professor from overseas, and I couldn't believe the insight that man could understand with the neuroscience, to pick up on the research that I've done, to understand what Kamal was talking about at the complexity that he's talking about it, and to interact in such an intelligent way. That man is born to be a researcher, and he is one of the ones that I want to fundraise for, because he is ready and trained and willing and keen, but he's just recently graduated and he needs to live. He needs to pay his rent, and he needs some food to eat occasionally, and he might want a nice new suit, little things that we might take for granted if we're practicing and making a lot of money. But he is keen to do this, and I am so keen to help him do this, but I need to come up with some money. And when I went through my PhD, and I was telling the guys this morning, I had the top scholarship that New Zealand gives out, the top doctoral scholarship that the government will give out, to the top 10% of PhDs across the country. So as a chiropractor, and I was doing very well in practice, I got the whopping $25,000 a year to live off. Yay! So it's almost pathetic, and it's like I practiced part-time and made more money in my, 10, 15 hours of practice than I did off my scholarship. Plus raised 2 babies at the same time, so no wonder my marriage went down the toilet and all the rest of it. We are kind of a slightly weird breed. That's another thing that I think you've got to realise, that we are slightly different, your scientists. Just like you need your marketing PR guys, you also need us. And, I try, and I think I succeed relatively well with sort of blending in as a perfectly normal human being. But, you don't necessarily see the nutty professor side, and I probably shouldn't admit to this, but I was in the toilets this morning and thought it was, washing my hands, and I thought it was a bit weird that they've got urinals in the ladies' toilets. Now, the sad thing is that was not the first time I was there. So, we are different, but you kind of need us as well, and if we can work together, I think that's even better. So all the other guys there on that photo, they're all students that are volunteering at the moment, and it's, I used to be able to pay them. Last year I could pay them, so that instead of them pumping petrol while they're going through Chiro College, they work for me, and I can pick out the bright brains and then nurture them on. I've worked really hard to find pathways for them so they can do masters and PhDs with us. So they can actually explore chiropractic questions without the bureaucracy of universities where, you kind of just got to go and align yourself with someone else. And that's happening. We've got 2 universities at the moment that will work with us, where we're their clinical partners, and they can do their research in my lab. So they can do chiropractic relevant questions and research in my lab and get their masters and PhDs, even though we're a private tertiary institution. Again, that's huge, and it's taken years and years of work. I do still teach, so we're still engaged with the students. I wouldn't give it up for anything, but I don't have to go to the 150 committees where I'd rather pick my eyeballs out with a fork than sit through another complaint or, discuss whether they should have this grade or that grade, or, it's insane. I've got so much more I'd like to do. So we have I call it the Heidi curriculum, woven in through the actual college curriculum. And so as they're going through their training, we start out in year one and we talk about the research and evidence-based and help them to sort of become critical consumers of the literature so they can read it and understand it. And then we scatter the lectures all the way through, right the way through into clinic, where we help them communicate the science of chiropractic so that they at least get what I'm sent all around the world to do. Does that make sense? Not only do we have do we teach to the students, but the students engage with us. And you would not believe how many of them volunteer for the most unbelievable studies, right? Where we shove things up God knows where, which I know most of you know about, and zap brains, and arms and limbs are jumping and flicking, and it's unreal. I tried to get friends in to be subjects for us, and they're not keen. They're like, this was uncomfortable. And our students do this on a regular basis. They come and at a drop of a hat, they volunteer for us. Not only do we have our own chiro students, but I also have now bioengineering students from Europe that come and spend 6 months in my lab. They come for free, so this costs us nothing. And they're only coming because, New Zealand's a cool place, and I have expertise in research skills that they would like to learn. So they come and work for me for 6 months. I look after them like you wouldn't believe. I had 4 guys last year, and they spent 4 days traveling around New Zealand in a week, and 3 days doing 12-hour shifts in my lab. And man, we produced shitloads of research. It was so cool. But not only that, you also get the interaction. So between different it's not just about chiropractic. They're bioengineers. They have no idea about chiropractic, no idea about neuroscience. And at the end of it, these guys walk out from our lab and they have a completely different view of what chiropractic is. And it's, you'd hear some of them, right? A couple of these guys were Danish, and they'd walk out of the room and they'd be talking in Danish, and they'd be, whispering away to themselves. But of course I'm Norwegian, so I could understand them. And they'd be going, fucking hell, have you seen these results? I can't fucking believe it. I can't believe it. And that's the changes in the brain after a chiropractic adjustment. So they go home with that message back home. And these guys were really just for me to babysit. But after they were here for 6 months, we've got studies now where their bigwig professors have now asked if they can be on the papers because they're so remarkable that what I've been able to change, and this is just me doing my chiro thing, and it's not a L5 on everyone, it's what I would do in practice. When I do my thing on these guys, now I'm talking to them about how munted they are, God, you're munted, I'm going to get you into shit. Anyway, so once I've adjusted them, the changes that I can then record in their brain is bigger than what these guys have spent their careers doing in one single session. I mean, sometimes you get 300% changes in their brain function. And these guys back in Denmark are looking for 10%, 5%. And I can get 300%. So what we do is, it's gold. It's gold, even in the neuroscience world. Man, it was fun. We had a lot of fun. I thought we'd, quite like to see Dave's lovely box shorts. Dave Russell has volunteered for so many studies. Even when I was at Auckland Uni, he volunteered and had blimmin' needles shoved up his arms, and anyway. But we also, at the point of the photos, was really just to show off that there's also professors that come and work with us and spend time in my lab. And again, it's taken me years to build up these networks and relationships, and the reason I do it is exactly what Brian was talking about. These guys have got 30 years experience in their own fields, for their own topics, and if I can tap into that and get them to do a chiropractic study with me, not only am I tapping into 30 years experience, but the bias for me to actually publish that study is gone. It took me 3 years to get one of my first papers published in a decent journal because there's so much bias out there, I mean, there's so many hurdles you jump through. So being able to talk some of these guys into doing work with us is priceless. But again, the cool thing, and this is thanks again to the Hamlin Trust, because if they hadn't gone into the partnership with the SRF, I would not have had Kamal in my lab for a month. And from that, I am now tomorrow morning leaving to go to Turkey to spend several weeks in his lab in Istanbul. I mean, how fucking cool is that? And I'm presenting to the whole medical faculty there. So I'm doing a chiropractic talk, and so I put in this really serious presentation on research, and Kamal writes back to me, no, let's liven it up. I want some Heidi presentations in there. So I've sent them back a new slide, and it's chiropractic changes the metrics of your brain. I've got photos of them. Nemo, Neo, whatever his name was. We don't only just do research either, but we also sit and we talk. So we brainstorm what the hell could be going on with chiropractic. The other cool thing about when Kamal was there is, when I first started talking to him, and this has been like over a 5-year period of trying to pick his brains into doing a study like this, when he first came out, he was going, oh yeah, well, you guys are nice to patients and you make them feel good and you massage them and, so then maybe they relax and maybe that's why they get, you get good responses, and I'm going, yeah, whatever. But by the time he left, he was sitting there talking to me about, wow, so when you guys do what you do, the person's central nervous system is better able to utilize that afferent information from the muscle spindles and turning it into force. And I'm going, can I just record that? Can you repeat that, please? But, so he again also walks home with a completely different view. And he influences people. But finding someone who's not biased, who's willing to work with chiropractic, to do studies with us, to just literally explore what is actually happening when we do what we do, is again so hard to come by, and it takes years and years and years of networking and building it up. And I suppose what I'm trying to get at here is we have a platform here in New Zealand now that is unlike anything else around the world, where we're actually doing chiropractic relevant research that makes sense to practitioners and to patients, but we're skint. And we've taken a cut in funding. So what I'm really here today to do is to beg you guys to help me, to join, so that we do it together. Because with a little bit of funding, I'm going to share some of the things that we can do if we had money. Some of the things we could start tomorrow if we had money. And it's not that much. Because some of the things that we've managed to do now too, especially through Imran knows everybody. I don't know how he quite manages to do this, but he has connections everywhere in any field. I start talking, well, I want to do a biomechanics study. He goes, oh, so-and-so would be keen to come and work with us. And I have CVs now from people all around the world that would come and work for us for almost nothing. Pathetic, about the amount of my PhD scholarship. And they would work full-time for me. And they can have an MD degree, they might be a dentist, they might be a PhD, and they would come and work with us just for the ability to work in New Zealand. Some of them want to actually gain a PhD, so they would work for me full-time for 3 years for next to nothing, just to get their PhD in New Zealand, with my lab and with collaborations that we have now overseas. So we don't need a hell of a lot to do an unbelievable amount to influence where we're going and to influence our profession, how it's viewed. So even though, say for example, we've only got like a few people in the actual chiropractic center, research center, we have got a virtual network that's much bigger than that. I train students in Canada. I work very closely with Professor Bernadette Murphy and Paul Yielder. I've got collaborators in Australia. There's some amazing scientists over in Australia that work with us. Denmark have now, there's the Centre for Sensory-Motor Interaction. I mean, that's my field. And these guys are the ones that have invited us to be their clinical partners, to do PhDs, to train PhDs. If I can come up with the funding, if I have the projects, and I have projects coming out of my ears, we've now actually started to design little platters. I've got like 68 plus studies designed and ready to go and priced. And there's, we've Excel spreadsheet listing the collaborators, the potential benefits to the profession. I mean, the package is being built right now to, really just take this to the world and just change. I'm on a little private mission. Have you noticed? I am going to change the way the world views what chiropractic is. And I would quite like to start in New Zealand, but I would need your help. And if we change New Zealand, then we become a model for how we change the rest of the world. With accepting, because here in New Zealand, chiropractic is what chiropractic is supposed to be. And I think you don't quite realise how unique a situation we actually have here in New Zealand, where we can actually touch someone's spine even if they're not in pain. Anyway, at the heart of everything we do is chiropractic. So whether they're a bioengineering student or whether they're some professor in some different field, normally by the time they've left, they are under care, they have seen things that they can't believe, they know what chiropractic really is about. And they take that home with them, they talk to their colleagues about it. And see, some of these bright young students, they're bright, and they're going to move up the ranks, they're going to be professors, and they've spent half a year in our lab and they know what chiropractic really is. So that's my, please, 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 please help us. We've got, You've all got one of these. The reason that we've come up with this, it's not like in competition with Hamlin or spinal research or anything like that. It's just a different avenue. Like the Scottish Association, they've actually levied all their members. Every single member pays a levy, and all of that money goes directly to my research centre, not via anything else. So there's different options to help out. If you're a Hamlin member, then keep up your Hamlin membership. You know, that is fantastic. What Hamlin is doing at the moment when they're working in this partnership scheme with spinal research, they actually amplify the amount of money that comes back to us in New Zealand. Because through that partnership, it's not just the Hamlin money, but it's also additionally funded money from Australia that comes back to us. You know, so Hamlin's doing a phenomenal job. But we really, really, really need more help. And if I could, I've calculated it out. If I got 20 of you signing up today, I can hire my first PhD student that will work for us for 3 years. You know, 20 more. 20 more and Matt will work for me and do his master's and his PhD. And that's a brain that we really don't want to lose. I mean, some of them, they're just worth gold. If we can do it, and I would really like to urge you that we can do this. Yes. By the way, is Glenn here? Glenn's here, standing up. This is my partner, Glenn. If you do not want to sign up, then I suggest you avoid this man, because he will be walking up to every single one of you, and this man does sales for a job, okay? So hide your credit card, because you would have filled in forms before you know it. No, but we can do this and we can do this together. There's many different ways that we can also work together. Because one of the things, it's not just about me doing more research, and it's not just you doing more chiropractic, but this is for all those people out there that don't have access to chiropractic care, and for our patients. And I reckon that there's a lot more we can do to work together and help each other. So we've spent quite a bit of time thinking up things that we might be able to help give you back for joining this kind of a partnership thing. And one of the things, well, there's several things. See, just hold that thought for a second. At the moment, in the college, in the research centre, I reckon we're close to almost $1 million worth of research equipment. And that's a lot of research equipment. So we've got a hell of a lot. And a lot of that we've gained through friends, and friends that have built me shit for, $50, stuff that would, cost you $5,000 to buy. But, again, with the right connections, you can actually increase this big time. We've got all sorts of magnetic brain stimulators. We can do EEG recordings. We can do joint position sense, proprioception, angles, knowing where your limbs are. We can do all sorts of multimodal reaction tasks, so how the brain picks up a whole lot of different afferent information and turns that into a motor response. We can do balance. We can look at proprioception and falls in the elderly. We've got all sorts of boxes like this that just are little black boxes, but they're amazing little things that will speed up the recording or the data collection process for us so that we can fit more into a single session. Each of these, if you bought them on the market, are pathetically expensive, and my mate Stan will just make them for me, for the cost of the materials half the times. There's Dave again. We've got all the EEG set up. We've got all sorts of joint angle proprioceptions. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the direction that we want to go with our research, the things that we want to actually address. There's several different levels that you could join us on. It doesn't need to be that. If you can't afford any of those levels and you want to contribute at a lower level, whatever, just anything. If we do it together, if I could go to the world and say that I've got, 100% of the New Zealand chiropractors behind us and funding the work that we're doing, imagine what kind of a strength I am going to the rest of the world with. Because I'm going to be asking them to help too. But if I can't convince my own people, like at the moment I've got the Scots, and they're supporting our research. It would just be so much more powerful if I could say that the Kiwis, we're doing this, we're New Zealanders, we're innovative, and we're going to change the world together. So, I know. Can you imagine that I've got the tightest people in the world having put their hand in their pockets for the research that we're doing? That's going to tell you something, no way.
Your links go to the Dutchans then, because they're second to us.
I'll gauge what you guys do first. I do want to say a big thank you though, because I know that there's several people in this room that already help us, and they help us not just with money, but that have helped us either as subjects or they've donated their services to the patients that we see in some of our clinical trials. There is no way on this planet that we could actually do this research if we also had to take care of everybody. Make sense? If you're running a 3-month trial on looking after 60 people, you know, we'd be working full time, Kelly and I, just adjusting them all, right? You know, and then we can't do the research. So if you guys aren't helping us, you know, it's not happening. And I just want to acknowledge those of you who have. In particular, I want to just put a little plug to the New Zealand College, because they have been incredibly insightful in actually supporting and funding me to do what I've done. Particularly when you look at what's happening now in Australia, like, we're in a completely different situation. I've built that platform that Brian's talking about we need to build to be able to go and get bigger funding. The problem is, New Zealand's government funding is run by the medics that also run the New Zealand Medical Journal, and anyway. So I'd also like to thank the Board of Trustees of the New Zealand College, because I wouldn't have been able to hire Imran if they hadn't gone out and externally fundraised for his position. So his position is totally external to the college. It's fundraised by the Board of Trustees and some grant funding that I already had. And we can't operate. We analysed over the last 2 years what we would need as a base core team to be able to operate a research centre that could then exponentially grow. So we now have that, but only again thanks to the Board of Trustees that did that for us. And I want to say thank you. I can see 2 of you in the back there. Like, it's priceless. I wouldn't actually be in New Zealand if they hadn't done this, because I couldn't operate from here. But I really want to be here, and I just thank you. But there's a lot of you guys in this room too that have helped out and that have supported us and looked after our patients, the pregnant women and the old guys. A lot of the smaller studies, we do them ourselves, and I know that there was someone, was it Ben Bruce that's just signed up right now? Anyway, so it's a growing list, because there's more and more of you that help us with these studies, and we really, really, really appreciate it. It's not just money. Like, we also need you to do chiropractic, and we need to show that. And we'd like to do that more and more. What we'd like to do is take some of this equipment to your offices and actually show what you do, what you can do on the brain. Because, I mean, I've just been in practice, 15 years, and I've shown what I can do. Imagine imagine what you can do. Imagine what we could show in some of your offices around New Zealand. Imagine the kinds of things that we can start to show. And we now have the expertise and the equipment to do some of this. It's quite cool. So what can we do for you? Other than the fact that I'm on my little personal mission to change, the whole way the world views what chiropractic is one of the things I think that we can do very, 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 very well is communicate chiropractic using that cutting-edge scientific language. Because you can't knock the science. And this is an evidence-informed and based world at the moment. And I can speak their language. So I can be grilled by medical doctors and GPs and anyone you'd like to sort of, bring to some nice meetings. And I'm quite happy to travel around New Zealand if you'd like me to do that, not only to train you how to speak this language, but to talk to your patients, to drum up interest, to do some media, marketing. I already help out with the council on things like some of these letters. They'll run them by me to see if there's any other research that should be going in them. The sports chiropractic thing, that's just so down our research avenue at the moment. We're trying to work with some teams, so I think we need to communicate a little bit more often. Research news updates. If we do these seminar series that I'd be really keen to sort of develop, CPD, we have to do it now anyway, right? If you'd like to learn how to communicate the science of chiropractic now in the new language, I'm more than happy to travel around and do that. And we could do it webinars, whatever sort of way that you'd be interested in doing it. I think one-on-one's best, because then you can actually practice it back and I can give you feedback and we can walk you through the steps of how you actually do that. But in addition to that, we could also start sending out newsletters to your patients. And I am convinced that you will have several patients, it won't take you long to think of a few, from your offices that absolutely love you for what you've done for them. And don't you think they might want to give back to the profession that has changed their life? And especially research. Research is one thing that patients can get quite excited about helping with. I mean, get your patients to join this research club. And I'll train you how to communicate about it and how you can talk about it, and I'll send you the newsletter that I'll send your patients 2 weeks before I'll send it to your patients. And if you've got any questions in those 2 weeks, I'll explain it to you. You know, and if you've got any questions, you can ask me, and then they'll get their newsletters, and it gives you something to talk about, something new, something exciting. Is that something that might work? Yes, 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 yes. Patient education. So I'm very happy to do this and talk through, you know, the whole Science 101. I know a lot of you haven't been in practice for a while, and like Margaret's saying, she doesn't have that language anymore. And I'm not actually talking about using very high-tech language, but I'd like to explain the process to you and then give you lay language that you can use, but you will understand then what you can and can't say. And I think that's one thing that gets chiropractors into trouble, that we say something we're not supposed to say. So if I give you the basic language to talk to patients in about the science, but in a way that you've already understood the background of it and what it means and the caution that you can put in. You know, we had this really cool study and this is what it showed, and I'll give you an example in a minute, and then I'll explain what you know, the caution that you come with, because it just makes you sound more professional. It's really, really exciting, but you know, they haven't yet done it in this population and that population, but they're looking into it right now, you know, they're our chirosciences, you know, and that's how you can talk to your patients about the new and exciting research. Get them really excited about it, and then put in a little few words of caution, because you've got to do that. And then, is that something that we could do? Yeah. Excellent. How does it work? How does it not work? Represent your local communities. Invite your patients, physios, anyone, you know, come talk to us. I read a lot of the physiotherapy research because they're really good in this field of mine, really good. Some of them are brilliant at it. The whole complexity of pain is another really, really exciting topic, how we understand that now. You know, how the brain interprets everything based on its past, its present, based on threats, based on its memories, based on its expectations. And if you understand that science, then you're at the cutting edge. So, you know, that's what they're talking about, us being at the cutting edge of science, so that we understand what's going on in the research at the moment. If you haven't read anything about how the brain works in the last 20 years, you know, your idea of how the brain works is just completely wrong. I'd say 95% of it, other than where it is and what it might look like. Because the way it works, we now understand a completely different way. So, our research program that we're talking about now, that we want to put together, we're working on our overall aims and objectives, we're working on our key questions, and we're working on this whole then package of the different kinds of studies. And you might want to just support one study. There might be one area of research that you're really keen makes, you know, that happens faster. Be my guest. You know, if you want to support pediatrics or jaws or whatever, I'll give you some examples in a minute. So our overall aim is to explore the effect of chiropractic care on brain function, human performance, overall health, wellness and quality of life. The reason we want to start with the whole brain function is that new story of what chiropractic does. Instead of talking about, you know, bones out of place, squashing nerves and all that sort of stuff, you know, what we want to talk about is that chiropractic care helps the communication, the accurate communication between the brain, the body and the environment. So it perceives accurately what's going on and responds appropriately. And that's what we do. You know, and if we can start talking that language, you know, you'll get so many people excited about chiropractic care above and beyond just the pain and the function. But we want to go more than that, not just there. More specifically, our objectives of the research program is to examine the impact of chiropractic care on brain function and how this translates into improved proprioception, so improved being able to know where your body is, sensory-motor integration, and better overall body control, so muscle control. And also then how this, not just how this goes wrong, so not just about symptoms and shit like that, but also how we can prevent stuff from developing in the first place. Because that's the other thing that we now know through science, is that things take and build up over time, and it's like 1,000 straws on the camel's back before it breaks and you're in symptoms. And if you can understand that and explain it simply to patients, and we can start showing that chiropractic care prevents problems from developing in the first place, like your brain knows where your muscles and limbs are, unless there's something wrong. And this is where I go into the whole matrix thing, and John did a beautiful lecture yesterday, just gave my lecture but in different language. You know, couldn't believe it. Smart man. But see, I talk about the Matrix. Has anyone seen the Matrix, the film The Matrix? Yeah. So that you know that there was that virtual reality that, what was his name again? Nemo. Neo was plugged in, and the messages were just sent to his brain, and he thought he was living his daily life, but there's evidence in there that there's something wrong with the Matrix. There was blips, right? There was the deja vu bits and things. Now we have those kind of messages come to us too, that there's something wrong with our matrix. Because our brains is telling us what our reality is, but it doesn't always have it right. And this is what John was talking about yesterday, which is perfect. And so if the matrix is slightly wrong, then you will have accidents. But you're designed to not have accidents. You're not designed to pull a muscle when you go for a run. You're not designed to sprain your ankle if you're just walking along or having it shouldn't happen if everything is in tune. And this is where we come in. This is what chiropractic does. It improves that communication between the brain, the body, and the environment so that it knows accurately what's going on and responds appropriately. I mean, it makes sense, right? That's the chiropractic story, yeah? So some of the key questions. So what changes do take place in the brain? And we really want to go and explore this now, really explore exactly where in the brain did the changes take place, how, when, and then how does that actually affect us? How long do these changes last? Is it cumulative over a period of chiropractic care? Or does it just last for half an hour? How does chiropractic care increase strength and prevent fatigue? And I'll tell you a little bit about that because we've already got some evidence that it does increase strength and prevent fatigue. Does chiropractic care improve proprioception and precise motor control? We already have some evidence that it does this, and we want to pursue that further because it fits the overall picture of what chiropractic is so beautifully. And the more evidence we have, the stronger the evidence we have to go out and say this. Does chiropractic care improve multimodal integration? This becomes really, really relevant to a whole host of different groups of people. They know, for example, that multimodal integration, the better you are at it as a kid, correlates with your IQ. Isn't that interesting? And we've already shown in adults that we change multimodal integration, we improve it. So basically, that should translate into us changing or improving the IQ of kids. How cool is that? There's a study to be done. It's one of the 68 plus little platters we have there. We also specifically want to translate this basic science research into the clinical trials. So the basic science looks at how does something change, but the clinical trials is what does it actually fix? So what does chiropractic care fix? Does it have a positive effect on autism or ADHD or learning difficulties or Clutt syndrome? It's not a joke actually. We are actually developing a little questionnaire and a little survey to see how bad is your matrix. How out of kilter are you? Are you clumsy? Peter went and translated into Clutt syndrome. Maybe we should actually name it the Clutt syndrome survey. But anyway, if that's going to help. Some of the things that I'm doing right now and sort of opportunities that we have, I'd just like to share a couple with you. There are like 68 plus at the moment that are actually documented. There's more. So tomorrow morning, which is why I'm not presenting on Sunday, is I'm flying off to Turkey. So this was Professor Kemal Turki. He came out and spent a month in our lab. And we didn't actually do the study that we were supposed to do. This never really happens because there was things that went wrong. So instead we did a different study. One of the things that Kemal does really, really well is spinal cord reflexes. I've never really sort of been too excited about it because I'm like spinal cord, undo the brain. I love the brain. I think it's so exciting, So bloody spinal cord, oh well, we didn't have time. We couldn't do the other one, so we did this one. So it's all about the spinal cord reflex. And what came out of that was not really that we changed all that much of the spinal cord, or we did, but that the changes at the spinal cord were actually driven by the cortex. So here I was thinking, and it turned out exactly what I have been seeing, but just using a different technology. And now, again, we're publishing that with Kemal Turki. Fuck. I remember I got reviewer feedback on some of my articles, and they'd go, really well written, really well designed, really well executed, nice writing style, very clear, but I have a philosophical problem believing that you can palpate dysfunction in the cervical spine. So because of that, I recommend we don't publish. And they sat on that for 6 months. So that's the kind of shit that you can come up against. But when you've got Kemal Turki on your list, and he was there, and they recorded it, all I did other than designing the study was adjust the subjects, and they saw it, it's a completely different story. So that's when all the bias is gone, Anyway, so I'm off to Istanbul tomorrow because what we're doing now is this single motor unit study where we're actually sticking needles into muscles, removing the needle, and you leave this fine wire, and it records from the muscles as you're moving along. So it's a very sort of sophisticated, high-tech technique that I really wanted to learn. Yep.
It's a negative question, but
yep.
With your research that involves adjustment,
yep.
have you found negative responses?
Well, see, sometimes what is negative? You know what I mean? Because some of the changes that we found in the brain, we can't actually say that they're good changes. You know what I mean? This is where the science, because each little study is kind of like one little tiny puzzle piece out of a 3 billion puzzle piece picture. So you kind of just got to keep collecting the puzzle pieces. What we're showing is major changes in the brain. I can't on all of them say that it's a good or a bad thing. But on some of them, when it comes to proprioception, no one is going to argue that improving your brain's ability to know where your arms is in space is a bad thing. You know, no one's going to argue with that. That's where proprioception comes into it. The other thing we've started to do now is add more functional tasks. So they actually have to do a functional task, and we've got to see if that improves. And so if that improves after the chiropractic care, and we've got these changes, at least it's not like a negative effect on motor learning. Does that make sense? Because we got this feedback, you got these changes, but how do you know it's a good thing? It might be actually impairing motor learning. So we had to sort of add some of these tasks into it. But this is where, when you've got like lots of little puzzle pieces, like I keep thinking, shit, got to include this, this, and this, and then I've got Kamal coming on, no, you don't, we'll do it like this. I mean, he's like written the friggin' textbooks on how to do it. So, I just do what he says, and, out comes this research. And the finding from the study that we did, which I will tell you about in a minute, but I just, where we showed that people's strength increased, and where we prevented fatigue for half an hour, and when we had this change in the H reflex, and there was this massive change in the drive from the brain to the muscle, it was as good as what had recently been published by some physiotherapist, neurophysiologist, with 3 weeks of strength training in the gym. Identical findings. I mean, go figure. They were doing endurance training versus strength training, 3 weeks of either, and then they did explored exactly the same methodology that we used, and they explored their changes. Our findings with a single session of chiropractic care was the same as what they got after 3 weeks of strength training. Imagine that. Imagine playing with that with your patients, eh? I mean, talking about that sort of stuff to your patients. Isn't that quite cool? Obviously, we've got to actually look at, well, does that translate into a sports population? They're not necessarily the same physiology as our chiro students, do we give the sports people that same advantage? Because if we do, fuck. Then no wonder, you've got your Olympic athletes wanting to get adjusted before they compete, Another thing I'm going to do in Turkey while I'm there, because I can, is Kamal is a dentist originally, and then he did neurophysiology, and then he spent 30 years doing neurophysiology. So he's done a lot of work on the jaw. He's actually known as one of the gurus in the whole of the neuroscience world on jaw. So his lab is set up, with the most, unbelievably expensive purpose-built machines to test jaw function, jaw reflexes, jaw motor control, jaw dysfunction, anything you can think of relating to the jaw. So we're going to start, based on what we've done and what he's seen, we're going to now test out, so if it definitely is a central effect, then if chiropractic care adjusting the spine changes the way the brain processes information, we might be able to show that in jaw reflexes and in jaw function. And if we do show that, then you can start taking it to the jaw dysfunctional areas and start looking in that area. And again, it will be done with Kamal. The other cool thing is a guy that used to work for me, Stan, who builds me all my machines, he also used to work for Kamal. And he's built a lot of Kamal's jaw machines. And when Kamal moved from Adelaide back to Turkey, because he got this massive €1 billion Marie Curie chair thingy position, so obviously you move back to your home country then and do that. When he left Adelaide, he left half of his equipment because he didn't need duplicates. So in my friend Stan's shed in Adelaide is a duplicate of all these machines that Kamal has in his lab. So what do you think Heidi Ho's thinking of doing? We're going to be piloting a whole lot of stuff, finding out exactly what works, because I'm not into wasting my time anymore. I've been there, done that. So I want to know what works, and then I want to get some of that machinery, do all of this in collaboration with Stan, with Kamal, but get the machines over to the New Zealand College and collect all this on, another $500,000 worth of equipment, but in New Zealand, at no cost to us at all. Yes. Other than, obviously, paying for the people to do it, right? And so again, this is where you guys come in again, because, believe it or not, there's a dentist couple who really want to get their PhD in New Zealand, in our lab, and they would be quite dead keen to do this research at a very, very minimal cost. So again, 20 of you guys signing up at the lowest level, I can hire this couple to come out and work for us for 3 years and do this line of research. And can you imagine? So anyway, other examples. One of the reasons that I went into research, I practiced AK with Andrew and Karina. My uncle's Andrew, Calder, and I kept being blown away with how you could adjust the occiput and the bloody psoases would again. Do you do that one? Or how you can adjust the neck and the weak shoulder muscles, or even just normal testing how strong they are, they become strong, right? You must be able to record this. So one of the main reasons I even went into research is I wanted to actually just record that phenomena. I've actually approached the guys that stick needle electrodes into psoas muscles, but not too keen to do that one on my own yet. But I am keen to start with the shoulder, okay? Because I don't know how many women would come in and say, I can't hang up the washing, you know? And as soon as they've been adjusted, it's easy, they can do it again, right? And that's, of course, the motor control drive from the brain to these muscles so that they're actually working the way they should, yes? So I've now got Stan's built me this machine. All I had to do was pay for the actual force transducer. So I think it's cost me $500. But, you know, to buy a machine like this would probably be about 20 grand if it was a commercially built thing. So anyway, this machine now can measure strength, because the study, the H-reflex study that I just told you about, we only recorded the electromyographic, you know, maximum voluntary contraction, the activity, and it doesn't really mean force. So when you're a scientist, and I've got my scientist hat on, you can't say you make them stronger. You guys can, because you could have just misunderstood. but I can't if I'm talking about it. So that's why I want to follow it up now and actually measure force. And you've got to measure isometric force, not a moving force. But I can measure exactly how strong they are before and after they get adjusted. And I can also measure, with this device, a position sense task. So I can do proprioception. So I can start saying, not only are they getting stronger, they're better able to place their arm in space. Of course, I'm assuming that's what I'm going to find. And of course, you don't always get what you're going to find. I can also do a stretch reflex, which is pretty much the same as the H reflex. So it's again looking at that, the drive that is changing what's happening at the spinal cord level. Because you know the brain sends its message down from the upper motor neuron to the lower motor neuron at the spinal cord and out to the muscle. So I can actually look at what's happening at the spinal cord and really start painting a picture of what we do. Now I've also modified that little contraption so I can actually test the strength in the psoas muscle. And I'm going to finally do that study, at least to show the phenomena that a bloody occiput adjustment can change the strength of the psoas muscles. But anyway, that's my weird questions. Other projects that are ready and raring to go, if you heard Lila Mason speak at AGM last time, she's a paediatrician in Auckland. She's German background, she reads the literature, she practices according to the literature, but very alternatively. And so she's really, really keen for us to do some clinical trials. So she works with diet and, you know, all those things that, you know, we know kids need to be healthy. We've talked about 3 studies just to begin with. We'll probably pilot them first to see what we get out of it. And what we've got is a psychology. She's either a psychologist already or she's a psychology student doing her PhD at Auckland University. So she can do the independent assessment of these kids. Lila will be the one that is a medical doctor that actually asks them into the study. You know, you have to have all these independent people to do a proper clinical trial. So Kelly Holt, as soon as he finishes his PhD in the next few months, is going to take over and drive this for us. So what we want to start with is autistic kids, ADHD children, and kids with learning difficulties, because they're the things that Lila notices that she makes a big difference. And if Alice Cade is in the room, is Alice Cade here? Lila already refers to Alice, you know, because Lila knows the value of chiropractic. So we'll design the proper studies to show then whether, you know, the addition of chiropractic care to these things makes an additional difference. Do you see how, you know, where this is going? You know, like bloody Australia, you know, where they're having all this fuss about, you know, whether it's safe to even look at kids, right? Well, we can actually produce some data, and when you do clinical trials, you also record if there's any adverse events, right? So you see where we're going with all of this and how this is going to impact all of us? This one is the one I'm just about absolutely over the moon about. I cannot even believe that this opportunity is happening. It wasn't even an option a month ago. This is just the sort of things that it's just sort of happening so fast these days, the opportunities that are coming in. What we can do is there's a woman called Dina. She's done her PhD in this full head 64 channel EEG. So the cool thing about EEG is that you can record, you know, millisecond by millisecond what's happening. And what they've done with a new technology with EEG is they can tell you exactly where in the brain the parts of the brain are firing, how fast they're firing, and which parts of the brain is talking to which other parts. So I can, before and after chiropractic care now, know exactly what parts of the brain are talking to each other and how that might shift. Can you imagine? But it gets better. There's more. There's, you know, since Dina and Imran and I started talking about doing this study, both of their professors, bosses, bigwigs, now want to be on the study. Like within a week, they had signed their names to the expressions of interest that I put into ASRF. I can do this project without ASRF because they will let me borrow their equipment and their programs. But can you imagine what we can do if we actually have the equipment? Which is why I've put in the actual expression to spinal research. Now, not only that, like this guy Kim down the bottom here, Kim Denstrup, he is the head of this Department of Health Science Technology, the Faculty of Medicine. He started the Centre for Sensory-Motor Interaction in Aalborg. He's the one that's invited me to be the clinical partner with them to do PhDs. Now the guy above here, Asbjørn, he's a medical doctor. He's an internal medicine specialist, gastroenterology. And he is flying to Turkey when I am there. He is flying over one night to come and meet with me for a couple of hours the next morning before he's flying back to Denmark again. He is that keen to do the study. They're not chiropractors. So we are not just making changes to chiropractic, we're making changes, across the different professions here. I'm still pinching myself that this guy's flying to Turkey. There's 3 others that are flying to Turkey in the 2.5 weeks I'm there because they want to come work for me. And they have all these different specialties. So I can't tell you about absolutely everything at the moment, but I just want to give you an idea of the types of shit we can do with a little bit of funding. As it is at the moment, if I don't get any more funding as it is, I am tied up for the next 2 years. Kelly is tied up until the end of this year, and Imran is tied up until the end of next year. And that's all the funding we have. At the end of 2014, I can't pay Imran anymore. Then it just ends. If I don't do anything, if we don't do anything, it ends. And so I can't start any of this without additional help. But with additional help, I could start some of these projects tomorrow because we have ethics in place, we have the design in place, it is ready to go. I have people that are trained, that have done these studies before, that can start it. And that's what's so exciting. Because all I need to do then is step back more and more and direct. To present it, to teach you guys, to act more as a resource, to work with the students overseas, to present to other professions, then I can do more of that if we have more people. Does that make sense? Okay, so the seminars I'd really like to run for you, I'll give you one example, and then I'm just going to race through the rest because I have no idea what the time is. Probably way over my time. No. I've got half an hour left? Fantastic. Okay, so the kind of seminars... What? Half an hour. Excellent.
25 minutes.
I'm going to walk you through one study, and I'm going to walk you through the H reflex study, because I think that's one that you could take home on Monday morning and start talking about. And I'd love you to try and then give me feedback on how that works. And if that does work, then that's the sort of thing that I will help you to do. That's how we can make this an exchange. It's not just you giving money to research. This is us working together to change chiropractic. So I was recently in South Africa and tasted some very interestingly named wines. I particularly like that one. And I saw some signs that I've never seen before in my life, and I don't think I ever will again. I thought that was quite cool. And I met some of the locals. But I also presented, and I presented 6 papers. Because of the changes at the college at the moment, I'm freed up much more now to actually focus on research. So I presented 6 completed studies over there, and I'm going to tell you about one, and if there's time, I'll briefly mention some of the others. But also while I was over there, I stayed an extra 2 days, and Bernie and I submitted 2 papers for publication. Since I got back, we've submitted another 2. So, like in the last couple of months, basically we've completed about 8 projects.
Heidi,
We're on a roll.
can I just stop you while you have a drink of water and everybody just stand up where they are, because we've been sitting down for a long time.
Sorry, I get on a go. Way too excited.
Okay, sitting down, people, thank you.
Right, note to self, include stretch breaks, Heidi ho, yes, okay. All of the studies that we are presenting, and wherever I present them, we talk about this basic model of how we see chiropractic care works. So this is not the big picture, this is just a narrowed down version of it, where we say that the subluxation or a joint, and I actually agree with John, it doesn't really matter whether it's a spinal joint, but if you've got lack of movement somewhere, if it's not appropriate, that is going to be signaled into the central nervous system in a different way. You'll have different or altered afferent input. It will change. And we know from the last 20 years of neuroscience research that if you change the input into the central nervous system, it will change the way it processes everything. But what's really fascinating about the spine is that spinal function impacts how the brain processes absolutely everything else. And that's what we have known in practice for 115 odd years, you know? And now that is exactly what we're showing. So we're not just looking at spinal function here, we're looking at, you know, the hand or the leg, and we're adjusting full spine. But then I might do a little bit more than that because I do my thing, like I do what I do in practice. And I think that's so important that in our research, in our chiropractic research, that chiropractors do what chiropractors do. So John can do what John does, and John can do what John does, and I'll do what I do, and Jody can do what Jody does, and that's when we're good, yes? If we start trying to be someone else or use someone else's techniques, have you noticed how crap you turn out for a little while? And then you sort of incorporate it and it becomes your own, and then you're really good at it? And I think that's really important that we consider that in our science. But anyway, this is a story I tell all around the world that altered afferent input changes sensory motor processing and filtering, changes the integration that takes place, which then starts sending out different muscle signals or different signals to the body and how it controls the body. And this can, over time, like John was saying yesterday, lead to all sorts of pain, disability, dysfunction in the whole system. And that's what we change. When we adjust the spine, we have more appropriate joint movement, which improves the afferent input, or just at least normalizes the way it should be. So you have more appropriate sensory processing and filtering, which then appropriate integration, better motor control, and therefore good function. And when you have that good function, I also think then that you prevent problems from developing in the first place. Yeah? And there's a lot of evidence now that backs this up. This isn't an idea or a theory anymore, and that's not even up to date. So we can say this now. We can say that that chiropractic care changes the way the brain processes information, changes the way the brain reads proprioceptive information, changes the way it sends messages to muscles. There is no doubt about that now. We have solid evidence about that. So this is my talk for this is my talk for the medical faculty in Turkey. Anyway, I was going to go and be a serious scientist, but it doesn't seem to go down very well, so I figured I might as well just be myself. So I'm going to go and talk about how the chiropractic changes the brain. So this is the study, and if I start reading out the title of the study, I know half of you will even go to sleep, so I'm not going there. So one thing I'd quite like to draw your attention to is these two authors here. That's Matt who's just graduated, and Jens is still our student. He was here yesterday, and so he's still a student, and they participated so much. Like, you can't just add people on as authors to a study. They have to have intellectually contributed to the project. And that's a lot. You know, I've had people collect studies and data for us, and they've never been an author. But Matt and Jens, so impressed, and this wasn't just me, but so impressed Kamal and Imran, that they insisted that Matt and Jens had contributed so much intellectually to the study that they were authors of the study. And so, you know, Matt's a recent graduate, and Jens is still a student, and he will be published soon, because this is going out very soon. So, because of all the research we've done, there's enough evidence to suggest that we change sensory-motor integration, that we have a neuroplastic effect. So what we do is change the way the brain works, basically. And because of that, and because of the fact that Kamal, who's, you know, this is Kamal Turka here and here, is like the senior author of 2 studies on how you do H reflex and how you analyze H reflex, we wanted to see if we can adapt the H reflex pathway. And I'm assuming that half of you have got no idea what the H reflex even is anymore, yes? Yeah, cool, that's why I'm explaining. So what we did is we've got, you know, 2 different sessions. People come in. We tend to use this kind of a model quite often, where on one day they get checked, their spine gets checked for subluxations. The other day they come in, they get spine gets checked for subluxations, or whatever, you know, you do in practice. You know, you check out what you want to do. We then do our baseline recordings on both of them, and then they either have like a control setup. So we move them around. You still need to interact with them. You need to sort of touch them. You need to move them. I'm not doing a sham chiropractic manipulation. What I'm doing is I am moving their muscles, I am touching them, I am activating their proprioceptive system, all those things that we would do before we actually adjust. Does that make sense? So the only difference between those 2 sessions is there might be some placebo effect, but the only difference is that I've actually adjusted one of them. Yeah? but they've still been moved around and touched, and the vestibular system has been interfered with and all that sort of stuff. And it's quite important that that's a control, because it controls for time, it controls for the actual, zapping that we're doing and all that sort of stuff, and it controls for the touch, the movement, the stretch of muscles and all of that. The only difference is that I actually adjust on one session. On this study we did full spine, so we checked their full spine and adjusted whatever I would have done in practice on that person if they'd come in and see me that day. So the H reflex. So what we're doing is we're electrically stimulating over a peripheral nerve. And if you remember back when you're electrically zapping over the skin, over a nerve, you set off action potentials in both directions. So you get the afferent fibers in both directions and you get the motor fibers in both directions. And the H reflex is when we get, the first thing that happens when you start turning up the juice is that you get the motor nerve. It's a thick myelinated nerve and it's a very sort of fast one. So as we increase the intensity, we get this, goes straight out to the muscle and the muscle contracts. That was the extrafusal fibers that John was so pleasing you all about yesterday. So there's your M wave, and you sort of get a blip and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then as we increase the juice, you start to get these, they're 1A afferents. They come from the muscle spindles, but we're zapping them in the middle. They go into the spinal cord, they synapse onto the alpha motor neuron, the lower motor neuron, and it goes out to the muscle and you get an H reflex. Okay? So simple as that. Yes? But it's not really as simple as that. There's a lot of neurophysiology that's going on there. There's a lot of connections at the spinal cord level, and I am no expert on all the intricate details at that spinal cord level, but Kamal is. So if there's any tricky questions from your reviewers, we will have them answered. Piece of piss. Yes. There's also a hell of a lot of connections coming down from the brain, and I'm not on this one going to explain how, but if that'd be the kind of thing that I'd talk you through if we're going to do a seminar. But there's a lot of descending inputs, so from the brain going down, not just from the upper motor neuron to the lower motor neuron, but a lot of control of what's going on, and that's how the central nervous system filters information, because it gets so much information, right, and it's only some of it we're conscious of. So a lot of that subconscious or unconscious processing that goes on is all of this physiology. And if we're showing that we're changing that, we're showing that we're changing the matrix, So, and I'm not going to go through all of that either, because again I'll probably bore you to tears, but 72% increase in the maximum voluntary contraction of their foot, so that's over 70%, and a 50% change in the V waves. That's the drive from the brain down to the muscle. So this is what it looks like. You're going to come up with all these pretty pictures, and if I had to do that, it would take me a month. Honestly, those figures are complex and the details in it, and Imran has it done in a couple of days. Couldn't friggin' believe it. And that was a couple of days when he was doing a whole lot of other stuff at the same time. These are the pretty little graphs that he spits out on the M waves and the H reflexes. This is pre and post chiropractic care. That one wasn't significant, although it actually seems to be quite a big change. But this shift here in that H reflex curve going to the left was, which means that you needed less juice after you'd been adjusted to get one of these H reflexes showing up. Yeah, and that's quite a cool finding, because that's showing that you've seriously changed some neurophysiology in that spinal cord. This was pre and post the passive head movement. They are just about identical, and you can overlap them. There was absolutely no change. So the scientific discussion, again, which I'm quite happy just to skip because it's getting a bit hot in here, and you're all looking a bit tired. But this is the kind of words that I would use if I was presenting it at a scientific conference or to professors, or even at the medical schools. I'll still use these words. I'd rather use a language that is accurate scientifically and that they don't quite understand. Because that's always a good look, yes? But to you guys, I wouldn't present it like this, because this means nothing to you, and I get that. Because you're not, I've been doing this for, 15 years now, full time, been studying this shit. So to me, it's a second language. It's like speaking Norwegian. I could stand up here and speak Norwegian, you wouldn't understand me either, right? But so there'd be no point, is my point. I'd rather speak to you in a chiropractic language and in English, yes? So if I was going to move to the English, there's the interesting finding that a single session of spinal manipulation is similar to what's been observed following 3 weeks of strength training. And there's the reference. And this Dario Farina is a real bigwig. He's going to be an author on the other study that we're doing with the Danes, but actually I didn't tell you about that one. But, okay, so what's really happening is there's this massive change from the brain going down to the spinal cord. And there's a whole lot of connections in the spinal cord that will change the way. And do you remember what I was saying that Kamal had said at the end of the time before he left? So what you're saying is, when you do what you do, the person's central nervous system can take that muscle spindle afferent information and turn it into more force. That was because of this study. So there's your 1A afferent information that's your stretch receptors, from the muscles goes into the spinal cord and synapses onto your lower motor neuron that goes out and makes it contract, gives you your strength, your force, yes? So what we were showing with this study is that all this change, the soup that's happening at the spinal cord level, coming down from the brain is changing the way that that motor neuron can take the information from the muscle spindle and turn it into more force. And this becomes incredibly relevant when you're talking to sports people, when you're talking about precision and performance, and not just sports people. What about the clumsy kids that keeps falling over, you know, in your offices, you know, just tripping over their own feet? Shouldn't happen. And that's the sort of shit that we can change. So if I was going to translate it into language that I would use with patients, and I'm hoping this is what would be useful to you, this study suggests that a single session of chiropractic care makes you stronger and prevents your muscles from getting tired. Now that is pretty fucking cool, yes? Not only that, but it's equivalent to what has been published in the literature from 3 weeks of strength training. Could you use that? I mean, again, that's exciting, isn't it, you know? This study suggests that there is a change in the communication between the brain and the spinal cord and the muscle. Now, isn't that a good one? Because that goes to the heart of what chiropractic is and does. So chiropractic care, this study shows that there's a change in the communication between the brain and the spinal cord and out to the muscle. And changes the way the muscle is then, you know, the information from the muscle is being used to produce force. Are they words that you could use? So the subject's central nervous system was better able to take the one-eye afferent or muscle spindle information, you wouldn't necessarily want to use those words, but the muscle information, and turn it into force. So that's how they became stronger. We're not magically making them stronger, but we're making the central nervous system to more optimally utilize the information it's getting and then function at a better level, which is chiropractic. So this is where you can then also, you can say, you know, these are the really cool things, but, you know, then be cautious. We look better if we're cautious. You can say, but they were only done, this study was only done in young, healthy males. And there's reasons for that. Supposedly the female hormonal cycle might change this H reflex. So it's a study we need to do. But so in these young, healthy, asymptomatic, nothing wrong with them, we made them stronger. And we prevented fatigue for half an hour. That's pretty friggin' cool to me. And so, but you can say that. So you've got to be a little bit cautious when your patients get excited about it, because of course you're going to talk about it so excitedly that they'll be so stunned. You can say it hasn't been done in women yet. We haven't actually done it in sports people. Maybe, you know, the highly toned sports person has got a slightly different functioning nervous system than these chiro students, yes? And so we need to repeat it in these guys. And that's what we're doing, and that's what our scientists are doing, you can say. Does that make sense? Awesome. What we're doing now, of course, is if a single session could do that, well, what the hell is going to happen after 3 to 6 weeks of chiropractic care? And how long do the changes in the H reflex and the V waves and the fatigue, how long do they last after a session? So we're following it up an hour later, 3 hours later, and 24 hours later on the single sessions. We're recording at week 1, so the first treatment or first adjustment session. We're also recording it again at week 3, so they've had 3 weeks of chiropractic care, and pre and post that day, we record it again and we see how long that lasts. And then after 6 weeks again, we record pre and post on the 6th week and see how long that lasts. Plus we have a control group, so we have a full 6 weeks of controls, and we do all the same recordings, and we have a washout period. So after they've had 6 weeks of care, is it cumulative, and how long does that last? Do you see, and that becomes really, really important into how we're going to talk about, you know, how does this use, how does this fit into our management, how does this fit into ongoing chiropractic care, should we or shouldn't we? Does that make sense? Of course we bloody well should, but anyway. So there's a whole lot of other studies, but I'm feeling like you're a little bit tired and I might skip it. What time is it? Could have passed. Would you like to hear just what the other studies, like in a nutshell, was about? Okay, cool. Yay! Yay. See, you really want this, don't you? Yes! We'll put together a CPD program. So this study was also done when the Danish students were here. So this was the Danish bioengineering students. These were the guys coming out in Danish going, can't fucking believe what you've done, you know. So we looked at both in the upper limb, so in a thumb, and we also looked in the lower limb muscle, what happens to the excitability of the cortex. So we're zapping them with a magnetic brain stimulator, and we're increasing the intensity, and we're seeing the output in the muscles. And what we showed was remarkable. This was the Danish students. What we showed was a significant and rather large increase at the higher intensity levels. So there's something can change. If you've ever heard me talk about the TMS studies in the past, I say that the brain's got gas pedals and handbrakes to every single muscle in your body, and several of them. So it's changing the balance at that higher level of those gas pedals and handbrakes. And that's exactly what we've shown in the past. So it sort of backs up with a completely different methodology what we've seen previously. So what we did in this one was only the neck. So we only adjusted the neck and because of the setup, and we recorded from the hand. So then we did the whole lower one. So the practical take-home message for you from that one, if you want a 30-second version, is that adjustments can increase the brain to spinal cord excitability, which is kind of similar to that H reflex study. So there's a second study that backs that up. And that should translate into force. Then we looked at it in the lower limb. The other thing we did with the lower limb, this is when Imran was there. And remember I was saying he did that stroke research? So you know they're the guys that sort of read the brain waves, read the thought patterns, the brain waves that produces, and then they try and turn it into meaningful signals so that you can use it to control a wheelchair or a mouse on a computer, you know, that kind of research. So what we did is we measured one of these measures in the brain from thoughts. So you think about moving your leg, you don't move your leg, but you think about it. Now the key to this would be that the bigger that signal is, the easier it would be to pick it up and turn it into a useful information, yes? Make sense? That's the nuts and bolts of it. So when I'm talking about an MRCP, you know, in an audience of BCI brain research people, they would know what an MRCP is and a bright shaft potential and the early part and the late part and the peak negativity of it. But all we're really talking about is the size of it, okay, and how big it is. So again, this was with the Danish guys. This time we did the full adjustment. So that's an example of an MRCP recording, and this is before there's any movement taken place. So that's the peak negativity. If that's bigger, it's easier to use in stroke populations, okay? So again, full spine this time. So the only difference between what we'd done before was that it was full spine. So when we adjusted these guys, can you see the whole curve shifted? So adjusting full spine and for a lower limb muscle, the excitability was just, the whole thing shifted to the left and up. So the excitability from the brain down to that muscle in the leg had dramatically increased, like ridiculously. And this is when the Danes were coming out going, oh, I can't fucking believe it, you know, because they couldn't believe that they could see it happening straight away. They were recording it. And that signal is increased. Now what that means is chiropractors should really be adjusting stroke patients if they are going to be rehabilitated to be able to use devices in this brain-computer interface. Because we would actually make it easier to pick up these friggin' signals and turn them into useful data. Now isn't that a cool take-home message? Obviously there might be some slight sort of, you know, barriers to get over there, which I can't wait to have, because that's going to happen. I actually went to some of the neurologists in Denmark. This was before we'd done the study, but I invite myself along. I tend to be a little bit obnoxious like that, and wanted to talk to them about it, and I could tell them immediately. You know, you can tell within 2 seconds whether these guys actually want to talk to you or not. And the wall had gone up, and I was like, oh, you bastard. But anyway, so I mean, I was there, so we just talked, and you know, he obviously he didn't know I was a chiropractor until I turned up. He'd actually read my CV. And then he realized I was a chiropractor. So anyway, we chatted away, and he was running this rehab center. And my family back in Norway, my dad's a medical doctor, and he runs this rehab center. So he is the lead doctor there. So I know a lot about it. I've grown up. It's my family business back home in Norway. So I started to talk to him about, you know, all about rehabs and, you know, the types of things that is he measuring this, and this, and, you know, how's it going, and what sort of interventions were they doing, and all this. And, you know, 15 minutes later, of course, we haven't talked anything about chiropractic, and he's completely changed his attitude. And he's going, oh, well, but I wouldn't really be interested in doing chiropractic, you know, in a study. And I was like, oh, no, well, that's not why I was here. Oh, why were you here? And I started talking about, well, what I really want to do is, you know, there's this cerebellum link, and with SEPs, some of the central potentials, and you know, you have access to stroke patients, and with these stroke patients, you know, we could actually show you this, and this. Oh, I'd love to do that. I said, yeah, well, anyway, but got to go now. See you, bye. But so you know, by talking to these guys in their own language, we can change attitudes, especially if we can speak their language. And that's why we need Peter to do the communications for us, because we don't speak that language, do we? You know, and that's why you need geeks, weirdos that use the wrong toilets to do your research, because our brains are just slightly different. But we can do this together. I think that's really, really important. Question?
Yeah, that shift, that previous graph, did you say previously that was a 300%?
In some people. And so those graphs are the average of the full 12 sample size. But see, if you look at what happens when you've adjusted them, we have plus minus 200 to 300%. If you do the passive head movement, just moving them around and setting them up, and we do percent setups on them, then there's like a 2 or 3% difference in what we get in these graphs. So it shows that when we do what we do, I can't yet, because of course I do a bloody fucking good job every single bloody time I'm working on someone, excuse me, but I do. And so, why I get, plus minus 300% changes just mind boggles me. I don't get that yet. Is it because some of them are more plastic in their central nervous systems? Are they more adaptable? I don't know. There's so many more questions that we need to be looking at. And don't you see that in practice too? You don't get absolutely everyone every single time, but some people you nail it, eh? And I mean, I'm looking at 300% changes in this one guy. It was like going off the freaking graph. But to change the scales and shit. I mean, that's kind of unreal. And that's where those guys that haven't been in the chiropractic world, it just blows their mind. And they go home. Like I've had bioengineers, students from Auckland University, they've also come and worked for me because they have to do it as part of their part of their degree, they've got to work 600 hours outside. And of course they go and sell friggin' stereos at, Kmart. How boring is that? Whereas if they can come and actually do human bioengineering research work in my lab, they love it. But again, they go home and this one guy was working for me and his father is an associate professor at Auckland Medical School. And he'd asked him after a couple of weeks, so James, does it work? This chiropractic mumbo jumbo? And he goes, fuck yeah. And he told me about it, so I thought that was quite cool. Anyway, other studies. This one we did. This was another one of those somatosensory rate potential studies. We started looking in these subclinical pain groups. Just stop me when time's up or tell me when there's 2 seconds or something, because I'll skip forward. The reason we're looking at these subclinical pain is actually a real definition that exists in the literature, and when I found it, I literally had a party for a week because I was so excited about it, because I get into so much shit for having asymptomatic people in my studies. Why on earth would you want to do a clinical intervention on someone when they're not symptomatic, I mean, we know, right? It's because of function and prevention and all these things, and we know we improve them anyway. So what I've managed to come across is this category of subclinical pain, and it's fantastic because it means that they have reoccurring issues like tension, stiffness, or pain, but tension and stiffness is enough, and they haven't yet sought treatment for it, okay? Now, how many people do you think in the population would fit into that category? So, Todd, have you ever had any neck pain? No? No. Do you ever get tension, tightness? Occasionally, maybe once every now and then? Okay, does it happen maybe once a month? Yeah, excellent. When you're studying, okay, tick the boxes. Have you ever tried to see anyone about this neck problem? Well, I don't have a neck problem. Okay, perfect. Subclinical neck pain. And so they go in my study. But then I don't get any trouble with reviewers. And this is what's, I can't get it out there unless I actually satisfy 150 different tick the boxes. Okay, so I kind of have to have some kind of category for these sods. So anyway, so what we've shown is that we change the way the brain processes information when they're doing a typing task if you've adjusted them first. So we're showing that these people in subclinical neck pain versus some people, we do find some people that have never had anything wrong with their neck, ever. So the guys that have got something, ongoing, they're different. And they react differently to their motor performance tasks, whether they've been adjusted or not. Can you see where we're going with that one? So we're linking it into performance, function, that, if you've got ongoing issues with your spinal function, it might impact how you do everything, learning, performance, everything. We then did a study that's quite cool, which I'll skip to, not that one, that one. This study here, that's the wrong one. Okay, skipping forward. That one actually won the award, by the way, over there, which is quite cool. This study, very, very briefly, what we looked at here is some of these neurophysiological measures in people with full-blown chronic pain, neck pain. And the interesting take-home message from this was that the changes in those neurophysiological measures did not show up until 12 weeks of chiropractic care. It took the full 12 weeks before there was a significant change in the neurophysiology. And so what we're arguing is it takes time if they're buggered. So if you've completely munted and you've got symptomatology there, it takes a lot longer before you change the screwed up neurophysiology that you want to correct for them to improve their function. So we're starting to look at that, 2 treatments and you're out the door is bullshit. It's rubbish. It takes time. It's perfect, actually. I won't go into the details of that one then. So that's the whole thing that I talk about. John did it very, very differently, and I thought that was really, really cool, but I talk about the 1,000 straws on the camel's back before you have symptoms. And it takes to pick away a lot of those straws. And us as chiropractors, we pick away a lot of those straws, and they function better. This one was really cool, but I'm not going to go into any of the details. What we showed here is that we changed the way the cerebellum talks to the motor cortex. And the cerebellum is one incredibly interesting part of the brain because it holds all your programs, your motor programs. If you've learned how to ride the bike, so this is where the matrix, if the matrix is out of kilter and your program in your cerebellum is a bit screwed up, you know, you don't want that. That's when you're going to be stubbing your toe and whacking your head and knocking your elbow or the kids falling over their own feet. So if we're now showing that we're changing the communication between the cerebellum and the brain with chiropractic care. And then the last study that I think we presented, oh no, that was it. So hopefully you're not feeling like this. And hopefully you get that there is a 3 billion puzzle piece picture and that each study is just one. But some people like us can see the bigger picture in the world of science. So, and that's our gift. And that's what we do, and would really like to do it together. And I won't let anyone leave the door before they've signed their forms. And I hope, Glenn, are you on the front door already? Yeah, you can. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys.